We are now moving on to our next first briefing item, our last first briefing item of the evening. It's the proposed 2017-18 budget. Dr. Swift, do you want to introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam President and trustees, members of the community. We pivot now to the proposed budget for 2017-18. The story of our 2017-18 budget is one fraught with the challenges of Michigan finance. And trustees, I placed an article at your place this evening that you've probably seen, but just released. Like that. Yes, it's a hard article, but just released on Tuesday. In addition to our usual concerns at the state level, just 2 days ago, the federal budget proposal released by our president. And so we have a number of concerns, both at the state and the federal level. We know, and I brought the Quality Counts national report produced by AASA, that Michigan underfunds public schools, and we know that. We rank a D- in Michigan, 27th in the nation, across the indicators of spending. We rank an F, place number 39 in the Student Achievement Index. So we've got work to do. We're also reminded, and I didn't bring it this evening because it's about this thick, but of the Michigan Adequacy Study that said right off the top, every student in the state should have $1,200 more. And it always bothered me with that study that they use the word adequate. Because I don't know of any parents or aunts or uncles that would sign their children up for an adequate education. And we want a top quality education. We want a quality education for every child. And yet, that report tells us we need $1,200 per pupil funding, an additional 30% more for at-risk students, and an additional 40% more for students who do not speak English as their first language. So if we think about all of that, we've got some real challenges in this 17-18 budget. I am proud that when you look closely at this budget, however, it looks very clearly like a board who has planned ahead, who has planned for consistency, stability, and sustainability. I am so grateful, as are you trustees, that we are facing enrollment growth in the Ann Arbor Public Schools because we only have 2 levers to work to increase our revenue, only 2. One is from the state and federal appropriations. We already know what's happening with those. And the other is through student enrollment. Those are the only 2 mechanisms to add revenue for operating cost. And President Stebb mentioned it earlier, since Proposal A, we no longer have the ability in the local community to levy for operating dollars. That right has been taken away from us. So we are mindful that this year is a year of concern. We're also grateful for the opportunities that have brought us to this point where we do have a 9.3% budget finishing the year 2016-17. And so at this time, trustees, it'll be almost like deja vu all over again. We're going to look at down your sheet 2017-18 proposed budget. Ms. Minnick will be working through those numbers, and the slideshow will mirror right down the sheet as she goes. We'll move through this as quickly or as slowly as you would like so that we have a full understanding of where we stand for the coming school year. Ms. Minnick.
Good evening, trustees. Dr. Swift. We have discussed a few times now our assumptions and projections for the 17-18 budget. I have presented all of the various budget proposals from the governor, from the House, and the Senate. We've discussed enrollment projections and the like. And So this evening it is my pleasure to present to you the proposed budget for the 17-18 school year for the general fund, which will incorporate all of those discussions and recommendations. So just as an overview and to lay the framework for next year's school budget in the general fund, the budget assumes the executive budget proposal, which is the governor's budget proposal for state funding. It has been modified for recent developments and the consensus revenue estimating conference that took place last Wednesday, where the state arrives at a consensus on their estimated revenues at the state level for next school year and the year beyond. This 17-18 general fund proposed budget also includes enrollment increases as a result of new housing. It provides for additional teachers and supports as a result of that increased enrollment. It also reflects our commitment to sustained class sizes within targeted ranges, programming, and classroom supports. And it continues our fiscal stability within an environment of constrained resources. So with that in mind, let's switch to our revenue and expenditure projections. We have updated our projections, as I said, to account for some information we're hearing lately out of the state in terms of our foundation increase. At our last budget presentation, I had recommended that we go with the most conservative approach for revenue, which is the governor's proposal. And at that time, the proposal still is $50, an increase of $50 per pupil in the foundation allowance, and an additional $50 per pupil for those pupils in grades 9 through 12. And as a result of that revenue estimating conference and other information that we are receiving from the state, it does not look likely that the additional $50 for the high school students will be granted. So we have reduced our anticipated revenue increase from the foundation allowance to just be the $50 per pupil at all grade levels. So the total amount of revenue that we anticipate in addition to what we're currently receiving amounts to $872,500. We have updated our enrollment projections for next year. Previously, we discussed an increase of enrollment of about 100 students as a result of some new housing development in our area. And now we bring to you a blended enrollment amount, which includes our schools of choice students. And so we are anticipating, again this year, an enrollment increase of about 300 pupils. And that amounts to a total increase in revenue of $2,533,650. So those two revenue projections amount to $3.4 million in additional revenue for next school year. We've also accordingly updated our expenditure projections. Previously, we were projecting additional staff increases of about 10 FTE, and the amount we project per FTE is $100,000. It's a nice round number. It could be more or less depending on what position we're filling. But it includes a base salary and costs for retirement, FICA, healthcare, and the like. And so now we have increased our additional staffing projections of our additional staffing requirements to be 25 FTE, and that's to support the increased enrollment, and it includes a variety of support staff as well. So we anticipate that that will add to our expenditure level by an amount of $2.5 million. The next line, indicating a transportation increase compensation amount of $450,000, that is a result of the mid-year adjustment we did to our transportation contract, and that occurred mid-year. So next school year, we need to be sure that we account for the fact that that is going to be a full year increase for that contract. That's the other partial year amount. The next line is in regards to the Michigan Public Schools Employees Retirement System retirement rate increase. So as an employer, every public school district in the state of Michigan contributes an amount to the retirement system on behalf of its employees. And according to the published rates for next school year, we will incur about a 2.5% increase in those costs. And that's just on our current salaries. If all salaries remain the same, we would still see an increase in our costs of about $930,000. The next slide item indicates a partial year compensation differential of $800,000. And what that is if you recall, as a result of negotiations for our employees last year for this school year, a majority of our employees had a mid-year raise. So for a portion of the year, they had a lower salary and compensation package, and then in the middle of the year, they saw that increase, that raise. And so next year, we have to account for the fact that it will be a full year, so $800,000 is that incremental difference in that compensation package. Now, in addition to these expenditure increases, we are anticipating some savings, some reductions in our expenditures as a result of retirements. Typically, we would fill vacancies with staff maybe at a lower step or at a lower salary cost from a staff member with longer longevity. And so we anticipate that savings to be about $35,000 per FTE. And again, that includes any differential in the salary, but also for retirement and FICA and the like. So we anticipate a savings next year of about $1,750,000. So adding all of those expenditure projections together, we're anticipating an addition to our expenditure line items of $2.9 million, $2,930,000. Taking into account all of those updated revenue and expenditure projections, and also taking into account the fact that in 17-18 we will not be incurring Allen flood costs or insurance reimbursements, we arrive at a total revenue amount for next school year of $235,449,220. And we also arrive at a total expenditure and transfer projection of $234,292,128. That results in a net change to our fund balance of an increase of $1,157,092. As a result of that increase to our fund balance, that does change the percentage that represents of our expenditures and transfers. So you can see that according to the proposed amended budget for this school year, as I just recently presented, we are expecting a fund balance at June 30th of $21,788,964, which represents 9.3% of those proposed amended expenditures. Given these new assumptions for the 17-18 budget, we are anticipating to have an ending fund balance at June 30th of 2018 of $22,946,056, which represents 10% of the 17-18 projected expenditures and transfers. So we have a few more steps to go through before we can adopt our budget. By law, our budget must be balanced and adopted prior to June 30th. And so this evening we have our first briefing on this budget. We will have our first public hearing and a second briefing on this budget at the June 14th regular board meeting. We will then have our second public hearing and approval of the budget scheduled for the June 21st board meeting.
And trustees, you probably recognize that this is a little bit of a change in practice. So what we're trying to accomplish, the state requires us to have one public hearing with our budget. But last year's experience, we wanted to give our public a better opportunity. So we're doing that in two different ways. One is we're not having the public hearing the same time as we're first hearing the proposed budget. So we're hearing it tonight, and then when we meet next, actually it's a couple when we meet next, a couple meetings from now, so they'll have from May 24th till June 14th, they being our community, to look at our budget and share with us any concerns they have, but also prepare to come to us for the public hearing part. So that will be their first opportunity. So that's one change in timing. The second change, which I think is also important, is that there's another opportunity for the public hearing. And as you know, we have public commentary. This is not that. This is a dedicated part of our agenda just for the budget, for people that want to come and speak to the board about the budget. So our public will have two opportunities to do that. The first public hearing will be June 14th. The second will be June 21st. That is also the evening slated for us to take action on the budget. So we should have ample opportunity to all think about how we're preparing for next year. We may find some more changes, although I'm not sure at the federal level if we'll know much more in a month. I doubt it. But we may know more certainly at our state level. So the risk that we have to consider is, like everybody, reductions in Medicaid and what that might mean for our budget. MIPSers will be handled at the state level, but that's one, as well as some of our Title I, Title II funding programs, if those are cut to the degree that Trump is saying. And we're not going to know that. By the time we pass this budget, we will not know. We are going to have to make our best guess about what we think will happen. So I think the article Dr. Swift shared with us tonight actually has some history on it about what past presidents have proposed and what actually got passed for presidents that were trying to cut or eliminate the Department of Education. So what actually happened. So if history is any help, I think the article's worth reading, because we always do this at the state level, but it's rare to have such significant cuts, at least in my tenure on the board, from the federal level. But we're just going to have to do our best work in anticipating what might actually happen, but also then what our plans or backup plans might be if we find ourselves in a different situation.
And if I may just reassure you that is precisely why we have an amended budget process.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
nothing requires us to wait until the wintertime to do that.
Right.
We can do that whenever
Yeah.
we anticipate a change in our funding or our expenditures.
Right. Okay, trustees, Trustee Lightfoot.
Can you talk to me, Dr. Swift, even maybe, how are we on the 300 pupils? We're banking quite a bit on, as you laid out, we only have the 2 ways to secure additional funding for the district. I'm just curious how we're looking on our quest for 300.
So thank you for that question. I think it is the silver lining for us right now is that we are in a growth pattern. We're thinking that we already have 150 on the west side of town enrolled for next year that are not with us now. Ms. Minnick did use a blended per pupil amount just to be cautious, which we've done, trustees, you recall, over previous years. We always use a blended amount.
Can you explain that to the public?
And
Dr.
that's to accommodate if schools of choice children, their funding is a little bit different. So we take that 9230 and ratchet it down just a bit to cover whether students are coming from beyond our boundaries or inside our boundaries. So, and we feel like with the modular additions now, for example, King, it looks like maybe an additional 30 students. What you all always have to pass a budget on, though, and you do not know, is we don't know how many students are moving away. Mm-hmm. They don't come to us in the spring typically and tell us that they're moving away. They just don't come back. And we do have a very mobile community. So,
Could you remind us the magnitude of numbers that we are dealing with, net in and out?
It's usually about 2,000 in and 2,000 out.
It's
And then you
significant.
see what the differential is.
Right.
And so the 300 is more than we put in the past, Trustee Lightfoot. I believe that's what you're pointing out. Mm-hmm. And we are mindful, but we feel like with the internal growth that it's probably reasonable. But again, Ms. Minnick and I may have to bring you a budget amendment if we fall short of that. Same on retirements and the other projections.
May I just add to that we do always want to be conservative on our revenue estimates. We always want to come in above where we are budgeting. So I do, with conversations within the district, we do believe that 300 is a reasonable number.
Well, keep in mind that we have still almost 2,000 students within our district boundaries that live here now and have lived here that are choosing something else. And we've made, I think, great progress the last few years attracting more and more of them into our schools. Our IB programs are now certified at the middle and high school level. That was work we started 3 years ago. That's going to be a phenomenal addition for our district. So if folks were thinking of something else, that opportunity is now really ready to go and fully certified. as well as a handful of other things. We've seen the maturing of some of our new programs that Dr. Swift and her team put in when after you did your listen and learn tour. But I think we still keep checking in with our community about what their interests are and what's needed. I know computer sciences is another area of interest, and we are looking at ways to start integrating that into our curriculum as well. So we continue to check in with our community, make sure we have relevant curriculum. But the more we're able to do that, I think the more and provide we're talking about naming the facility auditorium after Dr. Ingram, but think of going and winning a Grammy in music. There isn't another school besides us, near us, that can say those kinds of things. So if you're, want that robust, high-performing experience for your children, it is really difficult to even come close to matching that anywhere but here. And I think the more we do those things, the better for every single person in our community. But I think the point being, we still have about not quite 2,000 students in our own district, living in our own district, that we could also be attracting with some of these wonderful programs, especially as they reach maturity and really start to shine.
Let me walk you through those next steps. I wanted to close my presentation by pointing out that our full budget document, which details the proposed final amendment for the 16-17 school year, as well as our proposal for the 17-18 school year budget, will be on display starting in the morning now that it's been presented to the board. This will be available at the board offices for review for the public. It will also be posted on our website so that folks can peruse the budget document that way as well. And so looking through the document, the recommendations for the 17-18 budget are in the front, along with the resolutions that will need to be voted and signed upon adoption of the budget, of the 17-18 budget. And we will be adopting budgets for food service, community and education, recreation and education services, and child care funds as well. Those are the funds that are required by law to have a budget adopted. And then in the back of the booklet are some supplementary materials. It includes descriptions of the various funds, has a glossary, and it also has information on the 16-17 final amendment and those resolutions. And it also has some charts that you've seen before on enrollment trends, fund balance trends, and the like. Great. And I believe you do have this packet with you this evening.
Thank you.